What's up, guys? I got another miserable day out here in Washington, so obviously I'm not climbing, and the rain limit actually is shot way up. So I'm like, I'm not even sure there's really any good places to ski right now. So we're in that like odd part of spring where we're waiting for that snowpack to settle down and become spring corn type diurnal cycle, and it's way too wet to do any sort of rock climbing out here. I'm gonna head to the gym after this probably just to get some exercise in. But one thing that is worth talking about is stoves. And so I thought, I've been wanting to do a series on stoves for a long time now. I just shot my first video about just my quiver, and now I want to go in depth on both types of stoves that I use. So this video is not gonna be as in depth, or this video is not going to take as much time as the other one, so I'm shooting this one first. This is my canister stove. I have a couple different canister stoves. This is the only one I brought out here, but I have a jet boil, and I have a couple of jet boils, and I even have a pocket rocket somewhere. But as far as working and being in the places where I work in the Alpine, pocket rocket for one is not a very useful stove because all the heat just blows away from it right away. So that stove is like good below tree line, and when you have wind breaks and stuff like that. This stove, however, is a really great Alpine stove. You can see it's not super huge. This is the 0.7 liter pot, or the 1 liter pot. It's between 0.7 and 1. It's the smallest pot that they make for the reactor stove. I do have the other pots here. So this is the smallest it packs down to, and you have to use it with this pot. But yeah, I'm just going to talk about reasons why I've chosen this stove, mostly because of the efficiency of the actual burner itself. And you know, the smaller pot of water, the faster it boils. So I got the actual stove right here. Another cool part is how they make separate pots, or bigger pots, so that way you can use the same stove with different pots, which is really nice as far as these nesting stoves go. This reactor in particular, you can only use it with the reactor pots. I can't just grab like a standard pot like this and put it on this stove. Actually, I've chatted with people who have done that in the past, and what happens is they actually break the stove because this grid burner right here will get deformed. If that gets bumped in, then it can actually break the stove and it won't work anymore, which is like the downside to these things because they're really expensive as far as canister stoves go. I think this set right here will cost you like about 200 bucks. So you don't want to break your fancy $200 stove, that's for sure. So yeah, before I light this thing up, I just want to talk about my pot selection. So this, like I said before, I'm gonna keep the stove in the pot since it's raining outside, and I don't want to deal with a wet stove, so I'm just gonna hold it in the pot for now. But so yeah, this is the 0.7 liter pot right here. It's not super huge. I like to bring this out when it's me and one client, or me and a friend, you know. Sometimes I can bring it out with 2 clients and myself, so 3 people. But that's getting a little stretching it, you know, it's kind of annoying at that point, so, and inefficient. But yeah, if I'm going out by myself or with one other person, this 1 liter pot is really nice because you can just give this to someone. It gives you a ton of room for whatever else is in your pack, especially if we want small packs. And yeah, the whole system works together. You cannot fit another propane canister, the actual fuel canister, in here with the stove. So that's a downside to it, is the stove actually goes in all weird. But that's fine. One person carries the stove, the other person carries the fuel, and that's no big deal. It's also really efficient, so you can probably, if you're careful, you can get by with a 4-ounce canister for an overnight trip, especially if you're not melting water. If you're melting snow, then you can still get by, you just got to be really careful about it. But that's when it's nice to maybe bump up to an 8 mil in order to give yourself a little bit of buffer room. All right, so the next pot, here's the original one, here's the next one. You can see it's a little bit bigger. So this is the 1.7 liter pot. And when you buy these things, you buy just the pot. I think they actually sell them where you can buy the stove with whatever pot you want, and then you can buy the other 2 pots. I bought the stove with the smallest pot, and then I bought these ones later on. But all pots come with the lid, the handle. They also come with this pot cloth, which I think is really nice, and then obviously the pot itself. So this is the 1.7 liter pot. It's the middle ground between, you know, the medium pot. And this is probably my favorite one to bring out because I think this is a great size for up to 3 people. And that's, you know, the majority of the time when I'm working, it's me and 2 other clients on a technical route. So I can just give, this pot is enough water for keeping things efficient when we're at camp in the morning and in the evening. You know, this one also doesn't really fit the canister and the stove together. I always put the stove in the pot because it actually protects the stove from getting bounced around and stuff. Whereas like the canister, you know, it doesn't matter if that gets hurt a whole lot. So you give one of these pots with the stove to the client, maybe you can shove some other, you can probably shove something else in there, like a little bit of food or something. But you give that to one client, you give the fuel to the other clients, and then you as the guide will have to take the rope and the rack. So your pack is heavy enough as is. Final pot. This is the last in the line, the large pot. Here's the single one again. This mosquito will not leave me alone. I wonder why. So this is the 2.5 liter pot. For any of you who like work for guide services, and this is the same for my service, when they give us reactor stoves, they'll give us this pot with it. And that makes sense, right? Because it is the largest pot to boil the most amount of water. Again, it comes with that little pot scrub and a lid function that's a bit more complex than the other ones. Handle that's actually detachable, so but it folds back like that. So yeah, this pot has a bit more features. Still has the same grid bottom. You need that bottom part to fit with that stove. So yeah, I'll use this pot for up to 4 people. I can even maybe work with 5 people on this, but at that point it's like probably just bring another stove and another system with you. So yeah, 4 people. If it's me on a private baker climb, I'm obviously there and I have 3 clients, then this is what we're talking about right here. It's non-technical 3-to-1 mountaineering and groups like that, wilderness hikes and stuff like that. So obviously this is the pot that I own. It doesn't get used a whole lot because generally I'm going to use my guide services pot that they give me with this. So if you can avoid wear on your equipment, then do it. You know, it'll just last so much longer, and ironically enough, this stuff is actually kind of fragile for being outdoor equipment. So yeah, that's my pot selection. And the cool part is I have a gas or a propane stove that really fits any group that I'm going to encounter, to the point where I just bring a second stove. So it's kind of like the micro stove systems, but it's cool that I can just have the one stove and then mix and match the pots with it. All right, so none of this should be groundbreaking for any of you, but got my some sort of mixture of gas right here. Fun fact is, companies will only recommend the specific type of gas for that they produce, and that's more of a legal thing. So MSR will say you can only put MSR fuel on their stove in their instructions, but you can put whatever fuel you want as long as it's actually made for the stove. So Jetboil, MSR, Primus, Coleman, you can use all those fuels, the Isopro mixtures with whatever stove you want. It's just more of a legal thing, even though all the mixtures are slightly different. But so yeah, just screw the stove on. Make sure that you actually have a pretty tight twist on there. Sometimes these stoves, if you're putting it on for the first time, the trigger won't be fully closed. So when you put it on, it'll start leaking like that. So just make sure that this thing is fully cranked down. So I've been keeping the lighter in my pocket so it doesn't get wet. But it's pretty simple. You crank it on until you hear the whistle, and then light her up. Now this stove can take a little bit of time to get fully warmed up. There you go, you see it's getting orange and everything. There's a cool MSR logo that heats up first. And once it's glowing orange like this pot is like ready to go. So, and the rain's getting in there. So I could put this pot on. I don't have any water in this pot, so I'm not gonna actually stick it on. That'll destroy the pot. The cool part is this thing will run and you can actually use it to warm up your hands a bit. As far as the toggle goes, whoops, I just turned it off. So as far as this toggle goes, if I turn it all the way up, it does not make a difference. The stove is on or off. It doesn't add heat or anything like that. It just opens up the gas a little bit more. So maybe it'll add a bit more fuel in there, but really it doesn't do anything as far as cooking. So this stove can be really hard to light if the stove itself is really cold or if it's really windy. I'm in the trees right here and there's no wind at all, so it's obviously not much of an issue. Obviously, if the stove gets wet, then that's another issue right there. But a few tricks I do. One, if it's cold, is you just have to keep on lighting it and relighting it, you know, until it warms up enough to actually hold the heat. That's really the only trick to it. The wind can be a big thing. So one trick is take this stove when you're like camping, if you're about to start your summit climb the next day, you know, take the stove and put it in your tent at the end of every night. And then that next morning, pull it out of the tent, light it up. So that'll help out a ton right there. Sometimes you can even keep it in your wind sheltered tent, light it up, and then pick it up by the canister here and then put it outside. And because if it's cold and it's windy, you can light this thing and it'll light up like that and the wind comes in and blows it right out. And then now you still don't have anything. So another thing I'll do in super windy conditions is actually hold the pot over like so, and then I'll crack just a little bit right here to light it up. And what that does is it helps kind of pool some of that gas around the stove, so it gives me a bit more gas. It doesn't just immediately blow away with the wind. And then it also gives me a little bit of a wind shelter. All right, so the best part about filming this video on the site is that there's a creek over there. So I can just run over, fill my pot with water, just like I would in the real world. But here's what I'm talking about, how I'll hold the pot just angled, let that gas build up a bit, light it up, and then immediately set this thing down. Of course, since this rock is so slanted, I'm gonna have to deal with that. There we go. So one drawback to the stove system that people don't like is the fact that you just keep stacking higher and higher. Jetboil makes these pronged leg things that stick to the bottom of your stove that help give it a bit more stability outwards. And you can just buy those separate. Even if you're using an MSR pot, it still fits on the same thing. But that kind of helps with adding stabilization. But you notice when they go to the bigger pot, it obviously it fans outwards more, so that way you keep a little bit of stabilization. But some people really don't like how you have to keep on stacking these things up. Go, adjusted the camera a little bit now. So all this smoke coming off of it is just the water on the outside evaporating. Lid really helps seal in heat, and then that'll help keep it warm. And sometimes I'm so paranoid that I'm just wasting gas. Before I know that the water is obviously going, I'll even lift it up and look at it after the stove's gotten a chance to warm up a bit more in order to actually see if it's still running. All right, well, there you have it. That's pretty much what there is to the stoves. Again, there's just like a few little things that I found while using them for the past few years, but there's nothing crazy. You know, it's ultimately a very beginner-friendly stove, and it has a lot of good things going for it. Some issues are you can't really repair them in the field that well, which is fine. You know, a lot of times if your stove breaks, you know, it may not be a big deal. But if you're in a winter environment, like -10, 20 below, that's a pretty big deal. So that's where, again, we'll go for more of the white gas and stuff like that. Another thing is in Arctic conditions like that, these canister stoves don't tend to work as efficiently because the fuel just gathers around the bottom and you don't have as much vapors burning off. So it's not something that you'll see on the bigger mountains that get really cold. Actually, a mountain that's not that big, Mount Washington in New Hampshire, it's not super tall, but it's extremely cold there. And so a lot of people there prefer using white gas because of the problems that canister stoves can have. Higher altitude expeditions like Everest or Denali, any of those sort of mountains, that people tend to go for white gas because they're more reliable at higher altitudes. And that has to do mainly with the pressure in the canister, as far as I can understand. Whereas the white gas stoves, they have the pump on it, so you can keep on pressurizing it. And these isopropane canisters, you cannot repressurize or further pressurize. So yeah, in the lower 48 and low places, backpacking, mountaineering, general mountaineering, even places in Alaska, you know, anything below, let's say about 15. Oh no, I used it at 15. So let's say anywhere below like 17,000 feet. These canister stoves are really great to use, and they're really easy and intuitive. They're not as much setup, they're not as many parts, they're smaller package altogether. The only issue is the gas itself. You know, if you have like 14 canisters that are all halfway full, then you don't really have a full canister, and then that can get annoying. These stoves have a good place. I love using them, and I'll continue to use them for sure. If you guys have any stoves you want me to check out, or any stoves you have opinions on, leave a comment about it. I wouldn't mind making a few more stove videos based on stoves that I don't own. And then if you like this video, got something out of it, please like and subscribe. There's more videos to come. I have a whole lot of other videos I made too, with other tips and tricks, so stay tuned and watch for more. Thank you guys for watching. It means a lot. Thank you for all your support, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Actually, hang on, one last thing to add with these stoves right here is obviously they're metal. Metal gets wet, it can rust. So make sure the stove and the pot are fully dried out when you store them. Obviously, I'm gonna have to dry out all of my stuff right here after today, filming in the rain. But that's what this nice little cloth is for, you know? You just make sure that the stove is nice and dry. I haven't put any water in this pot, so I'm gonna stick this in here to keep it safe. Yeah, take care of your stoves. They take care of you.